White Owl cigar. We set out to make it the mildest, best-tasting cigar that you can buy for your money. Did we succeed? We think so, and the fact that so many thousands are switching over to it seems to clinch the argument. They're switching from other 5-cent cigars, and even from more expensive cigars, too. And they wouldn't make that switch unless they had a mighty good reason. In every new White Owl, we give you a generous amount of real Havana tobacco. And Havana's the finest cigar tobacco there is. Rich, mellow, and fragrant. And we blend that Havana leaf with light, fine domestic tobaccos, so it won't be too heavy. That gives you that real Havana flavor in a smooth, mild smoke. That's the reason men are switching to the new White Owl. Why, even smokers back from Havana, who ought to know if anybody does, have tried our new White Owl and tell us it has true Havana taste. It's so mild that you can smoke as many as you like, especially since White Owls cost just 5 cents. Tomorrow, try it. Ask for the new, blended with Havana White Owl. Now, here's Mr. Swing.
Good evening. Chancellor Hitler today vaguely offered peace to Britain in a speech delivered for a change in a fairly quiet tone. The peace offer was without details, it was just the word. The terms of the peace have to be deduced from other things that the German Führer said, but the important one can be deduced. The Chancellor said that if Britain didn't make peace, the great British world empire would be destroyed, and he also said that he had never desired that. So presumably, if Britain will make peace, it can keep most of its empire. As the Chancellor explained that the war was due to what he called the criminal category of Jews, Freemasons, armament manufacturers, war profiteers, international businessmen, and stock exchange jugglers, one can assume that these people will have to be exterminated from British public life. But that's about all to be ferreted out of the hidden meanings. The Chancellor, by his quieter tones, making an appeal to what he called common sense, said that he was asking peace in the voice of a victor speaking reason. I can see no reason why this war should go on, he declared. I am grieved to think of the sacrifices it will claim. Being a victor's offer, it was made with a threat. The statesmen of Britain, said Herr Hitler, apparently have no conception of the destruction that will be visited on England if Prime Minister Churchill continues to demand a fight to the finish. But one thing is sure, he continued, no Churchill will be left in that case to attempt the rehabilitation of Britain. The people left behind in London will have ideas entirely different from those of Churchill or his colleagues. As the speech reviewed the now-ended Continental War and included a complete eulogy of the German soldiers and people, and was accompanied by the decoration and promotion of some of the highest army officers, it might be thought a suitable prelude to the end of the war. But only if preparations for peace have been made successfully behind the scenes. About peace maneuvers behind the scenes, little can be said with confidence. We do have reports of 3 peace feelers, all of them reaching Britain in the last days. One came through Spain, one from a Vatican source, one from an unidentified Mediterranean power, which might well be Yugoslavia. All the offers, says the London correspondent who tells about them, were rejected. That shouldn't be surprising, for the Hitler peace offer was rejected in advance by Prime Minister Churchill in his last Sunday's broadcast. If Mr. Churchill's rejection was sincere, and there's no reason to doubt that it was, then why did Chancellor Hitler make his speech? Several reasons can be suggested to answer that question. One of them is that it's Hitler's faithful practice to pay attention to the record. If he's about to ask sacrifices of his people, he makes a speech which puts the blame on the other fellow. He argues that he has done his best to be reasonable, and his hand of friendship has been rejected. You'll recall that it was rejected by Poland, it was rejected by France, and now it's being rejected by Britain. Another reason for the speech is that Italy wanted it. Italy's position in the war is not at all a happy one. A long war would be disastrous for Italy. The country would be shut off from food and raw materials. and the Italian people have no stomach for a long war. It's fairly clear that Italy wanted a peace feeler before any attack on Britain. It was the Italians who were the first to know that today's speech was going to be made. They knew it before official quarters knew it in Berlin. And when official quarters in Rome predicted it, Berlin was stupefied. It hadn't heard that Count Ciano was coming to Berlin, that the Reichstag was to be summoned, and that Herr Hitler would speak. And then the speech is to be appraised for a double propaganda value. It'll have some value in Britain, in that it sought to drive a wedge between the British government and the British people, just as British speeches have sought to drive a wedge between German leaders and people. With what success is another matter, but Herr Hitler gave the British people a picture of their leaders being dominated by the single desire for war profits. Of Chamberlain, for instance, saying, which he never did, that Britain had now transformed its economy to a war basis and so had to fight. Herr Hitler held out the temptation of preserving the empire. He spoke of his one failure, having been to win the friendship of Britain. And while such words may not have much or any effect now, they'll be remembered if and when the invasion campaign begins taking a terrible toll of life and home property in Britain. And finally, the speech was a tonic to public morale in Germany. The central clue of the speech may turn out to be the reference in it to a long war. Herr Hitler announced that recently a 5-year plan has been adopted which will make it possible for the Germans to continue the war indefinitely. A remark like that dropped in the middle of the speech will have made many a listener in Germany wrinkle his forehead. For though Herr Hitler has never promised it publicly, he has promised privately again and again that the war will be over this year. And most Germans have believed it would be over in July and at the latest in August. And now they hear about a long war. They remember that Hitler had said that before, but that was before the easy and quick triumphs in Poland and France. Britain, it seems, may be another story. One further remark about the speech has been made. Herr Hitler failed to retort to President Roosevelt's recent denunciation of dictators. And that omission might have been designed to keep President Roosevelt available as an eventual mediator in the peace. An interesting passage in the speech was its reference to relations with the Soviet Union. In past speeches, Herr Hitler has referred to the Russians as friends. This time, there's no mention of friendship. Instead, there's a new phrase. This is it, the clear delineation of spheres of influence. Herr Hitler said the hope of estranging Russia and Germany is the wandering Jew in the dream world of British diplomacy. And then he went on to say that relations with the Soviet Union rest upon the clear delineation of spheres of interest, and added, British stories that Germany is going to attack the Ukraine have been rendered futile by discussions that have taken place between German and Russian diplomats. British statesmen are always slow to see things. Perhaps in due time they will see this fact. The speech has been made. What now? What will be the British response? The first official words from London were that Mr. Churchill has already refused to consider peace. And with a timing that can hardly have been accidental, the British government today named a new commander-in-chief for the home forces, replacing that soldier with the magic name Sir Edmund Ironside. His successor is a fighting Irishman, Sir Alan Francis Brooke. He commanded the 2nd British Army Corps in Flanders and is credited with an all-around knowledge of mechanized warfare and gunnery, which Mr. Churchill believes essential to a commander-in-chief charged with repelling invasion. Ironside was made a field marshal in recognition of his services, and at the same time Viscount Gort, commander of the British Expeditionary Force, was named Inspector General for British soldiers in training, and his will be the vital job of speeding up the drill of the new recruits. But now that Hitler has spoken will there be immediate invasion? Presumably not, for a peace speech should be followed by a waiting time while a reaction to it develops. One Italian newspaper writes that the invasion may be put off for as long as a month. A realistic obligato to the speech was supplied in many parts of Britain, where it was listened to by the still free British, and it consisted of bursting bombs and anti-aircraft fire, for the German air raids today were about the most severe of any day of the war. In one air battle alone, 150 German and British planes took part. The British give no hint of the extent of any damage done, though they announced that they had brought down 11 invading planes and lost 5 themselves. A new topic of interest that is sharing attention with the expected invasion is Gibraltar. Some believe that an attack on Gibraltar will precede invasion, others that it will come at the same time. Now that France is out of the war, Gibraltar is of indispensable value to Britain. The French ports being closed, it's the one British naval base in the western Mediterranean. If it is lost, the Italian fleet can't be bottled up in that sea and can take part in the blockade of Britain or even in German invasion efforts. Gibraltar itself can stand a long siege, even if attacked from the land side, but the naval base can be made unusable before the fortress itself falls. Germany has troops either already in Spain or waiting on the Spanish frontier, and they're reported to be ready to move to the siege. They also are said to be ready to overpower Portugal, or at least to keep the British from using Portuguese bases. If the British force in the Mediterranean can be weakened, then Germany and Italy can advance in the Near East. Italy already is claiming Palestine. Syria is the gateway to the Mosul oil fields and Arabia, and Gibraltar now becomes of priceless value to both sides in the war. The British banked on controlling Franco, whom they were willing to see come to power in Spain. Now they may well regret that the Republican government was allowed to go under, and they must read with bitterness a statement made last month by Victor de la Serna, a Franco statesman, in which he says, if the first great battle of this enormous European civil war had not been won by Spain, that is, by Franco, a line of batteries and ports would now be in the power of the old order, threatening the great European revolution. Franco has already demanded Gibraltar, and the Italian press says that it must belong to a Mediterranean power. Whether Franco will have to fight for it is not yet clear. The Italians raided Gibraltar by air yesterday with heavy casualties to civilians who are now being evacuated. The Italians today had a revealing experience with British naval gunnery, losing the swiftest of their crack new cruisers, the Bartolomeo Colleoni, which was sunk by the Australian cruiser Sydney, a ship of the same gun power and at least 6 miles an hour slower speed. Now, before saying good night,